Warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family of Podcasts. We've got a tremendous podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to be chatting with Rob Donaldson. Going to be a great chat there. Going to talk a little bit about some of the betting angles that he takes a look at for this early portion of the season. We are also going to be talking about how impactful it is to take a look at free throw shooting and the sorts of games where gauging free throw shooting percentages, how frequently a team gets to the free throw line, what sort of games it is more critical in than others. We're going to be diving in on that front. We're going to be taking a look at these games that we've got on Wednesday as well. So a smorgasbord of information coming up from Rob, who does great work over on his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. Tremendous handicapper on so many fronts. He joins me in segment number 2. Here in the first segment, I did get a few Twitter/X questions from you guys, and we're going to be diving in on those. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, much like I'll be answering a feed today, you've got one or two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter. As per usual, please send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated from there. You're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I don't know where my Twitter mailbag sounder went. I'm going to need to try to unearth that, or else I'm going to need to get my buddy. For those of you guys out there in Wisconsin, Cody Crump is actually the guy who always does the bank shot sounder and everything like that. I might need him to record a little bit of something, but let's dive in on a few questions because I know you guys had some, and I did get a question with regards to why I don't base my handicap based around market numbers, and I mean, the answer is very simple. My handicap should be my own, and I trust myself more so than I do trust in a lot of other human beings, for lack of a better term. That's sharp bettors, that's talking media heads that you see on TV, because I mean, how many times haven't we watched a game on TV the last few days where it's like, oh, so-and-so team looks so impressive. They're doing a great job in this aspect, and then they are on the wrong end of a 10-0 run. It happens like every single time. I laugh every single time, and I feel like every single time I hear a commenter say, oh, this team looks really impressive. I just want to live bet the other side. I'm sure that it would make a whole bunch of money, but you do want your handicap to be your own, and I want to trust in what has really resulted in success and a profit for me. Now, for other folks, that might be taking a look at others' plays, whether that be myself. There's so many great follows out there on Twitter/X. The gentleman that's coming up in segment number 2, Rob Donaldson, you can't go wrong taking a look at a lot of his plays, but I do what's worked best for me, and I don't want to fall into the trap of my handicap's no longer being my own. That's why I don't really move when it's like, oh, the market's team side X, side Y. That doesn't affect me whatsoever. I still have the same handicap on my game, and I also got the question as to whether or not I try to middle games, and I personally do not. Like the example I gave on Twitter/X is a total opens up at 142, and I have it rated as a 145 total, which 142 less than 145, I like the over there. You bet it, and let's say that just before tip it's at 146/146.5. If I feel like I've got good value on that total, why should I put myself in danger of perhaps canceling out that bet? Now, perhaps it results in being able to break even. Perhaps you're able to get a middle, which that would be absolutely tremendous. But I tried that a few times many years ago, and a lot of my handicapping is based on mistakes that I have made. Like, if you've ever listened to Billy Walters, he talks about the fact that he failed with some of his systems a few times. The reason why I do have what I do with regards to flat betting the board, essentially, with regards to why I don't middle, is because I have done some experimenting in the past. There are things that have worked out very well, and there are things that have not worked out very well, and trying to do that system has not worked out very well for me, and I'm not here to say that you absolutely should not do it. Like, I am someone that I will not bet a parlay. If you're coming to this podcast for parlays, you are going to be greatly disappointed, but that said, if you're having a bunch of success betting parlays, if it's something that you've been doing for quite a while, you're making money on it, don't let me or anyone else tell you otherwise. This is an industry in which there's lots of different ways to be able to make money. Just because I have success doing it my way doesn't mean that you should take that as gospel. And if you bet the exact opposite way that I do and you make money, continue to do so, because it is all based on yourself getting to the window. I do my best to be able to just give my side of things so you can fade it, you can take it, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. I believe that utilizing multiple sources of information is tremendous as well. We've got Rob Donaldson coming up in segment number 2. You guys, for those of you guys that like futures, Eli Hershkovich joined me a few days ago to be able to help out on that front. You guys always hear the gentleman from the 3-Man Weave, the Field of 68, Heat Check CBB, Sleepers Media. These are all tremendous resources. They all do good work. They're all a little bit different than myself. Evan Miyakawa does a great job with his analysis. You've got someone like Eric Haslam, who joined this podcast a few weeks ago. I think that our good friend Cam Pomeroy, he does amazing work. I don't utilize their numbers, but I respect the heck out of what they do. I just want my handicap to be my own, and I think that that's the best way of being able to put it. So hopefully that did answer some of the questions that you guys have, and like I said, if it didn't, Twitter/Xfeed at @June_1. More than happy to air those out. We've got 5 months of college basketball, so we've got plenty of opportunities to be able to answer those questions, and hopefully I was able to clear up a few of those for you. Now let's take a look back at what we saw both late Monday and early Tuesday, since I do have to record this recap a little bit early. The Greg Peterson Experience sort of works in tandem with this podcast. That is from midnight to 3 Eastern Time on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. If you're out there on the West Coast, that is 9 to midnight. So let's recap some of the games that we saw late Monday and what we all got on the betting board on Tuesday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
And I will certainly flesh out the James Madison versus Michigan State game the next few days, but James Madison was able to pull off the outright win, the biggest stunner that we did see on Monday while I was doing this podcast. James Madison was actually in the lead, but that game was hanging in the balance a little bit more. James Madison, they do indeed be able to get the job done by kind of 79 to 76, as the biggest thing in this one was Michigan State shooting 1 of 20 from three-point range. I think that there's a lot that you can dissect from that. I don't think that Michigan State is going to be shooting 1 of 20 from three-point range again anytime soon, but that was something that was certainly jarring to see, to say the least. In terms of the ranked teams that I wasn't able to get to yesterday, you saw Duke just completely lay it on Dartmouth by kind of 92 to 54. Duke has really been playing a lot more defense-oriented ever since John Shire got to town, and Dartmouth just was unable to do anything whatsoever on this day. They lost the rebound battle by kind of 33 to 29, which actually wasn't terrible, but Duke, they went 7 to 17 from three-point range. Cal Filipowski completely controlled this game with 25.7 rebounds, and you saw some nice signs out of the freshmen. Caleb Foster was able to put in there a double-figure amount of points. Jalen Blakes, he was able to give you 10 points as well, so very encouraging signs for Duke. You had Tyrese Proctor have 8 assists to 1 turnover. Very good showing there. You saw USC be able to get it done against Kansas State by a count of 82 to 69, and I am concerned about this Kansas State team with not having DeQuan Tomlin out there now. David Engesson was able to register a double-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, and this is a USC team that's very good down low that actually lost the rebound battle to Kansas State 44 to 41, but for this USC bunch, how about Mr. Isaiah Collier being so efficient? 7 of 9 from the floor. He did have 6 turnovers, but also had 18 points. It was a game of sloppy joes with a combined 35 turnovers in this one, but for USC, they did a good job down low with Joshua Morgan, providing 5 blocks. When they give Vincent Iwuchukwu, they're going to have even more down low. Very bullish on this USC team. Arizona had the more gaudy results of the two because they just completely pile drove Morgan State, and we did see a lot of these ranked teams just go out there, win and cover against these schlub teams. We're going to call it what it is. Sorry, Morgan State, but 122 to 59. Arizona went 12 of 27 from three-point range and 26 out of 32 at the free throw line. Every single one of their starters were able to score at least 12 points. They had 8 different guys be able to get to at least 10 points in this one. For Morgan State, they got pile driven on the glass, losing that battle 49 to 27. Just complete and utter domination. Morgan State looking like they're in for a rough year. And I did have someone else ask me as well why I don't give a list of just my bottom feeder teams in college basketball, because like Morgan State, I'm sorry, but that would be a team that is certainly on there. The likes of IUPUI, Mississippi Valley State, and the big reason why on that as well is because you are betting numbers. You are not betting teams. And we did see one of those aforementioned teams, IUPUI, who they were not good last year, to say the least. They were very, very bad. They still made you a lot of money towards back half of the season. Same goes for Delaware State. So you do want to be very mindful there. I was also, with regards to the late Monday slate, very encouraged by what I saw out of Washington. They took down Bellarmine 91-57. I do think this might be a tad bit of a down year for Bellarmine, but I felt like Washington was a little bit slept upon coming into the season. You had a big performance out of Keon Johnson, goes 5 of 8 from 3, 25 points. Keon Brooks, 22 points. So these guys were able to do a nice job. Corin Johnson, I think I called him Keon Johnson. My apologies to Mr. Johnson, but these two gentlemen, they really got it going. You've got some nice size down low front, and Kepadog is back from injury, so I think that that's a Washington team that you do want to be very mindful of. San Diego State, they get a win and cover 83-57 as well, and I do think that taking a look at this team as well in New Mexico is going to be very big, as they've got a big game coming up on Thursday against St. Mary's, 92-55. Defense looked a little bit better. Granted, it was against Texas Southern, who they just always have a difficult time being able to shoot from three-point range, to say the least, but that's something that struck me. And also the fact that Elon, who was up at 1 point against Wake Forest, I believe by either 18 or 19 points, they failed to cover the game. That I did think was a little bit of hilarity. 101-78. This was a closing number of Wake Forest, laying 19.5 points. And I mean, this was all Elon to start out the game. They got up 19 points actually at one point, and then Elon got outscored 58-23. So do not consider these games over. I will make that known right about now, because these games, they are never over until the clock hits zeros and there is no tie up there on the board. And then in terms of the Tuesday card, Indiana had a little bit of a tough time with it against Florida Gulf Coast. I did think that Indiana left something to be desired in the backcourt coming into the season, but for Florida Gulf Coast, give credit where credit is due. They go 13 of 34 from three-point range. Dunk City loses by kind of 69-63, but game opponent here, as you were able to get 19 points, 7 rebounds out of Zach Anderson, and Florida Gulf Coast held their own on the glass. They tied in terms of the rebound battle, 33-all. Would like to see a little bit more out of Malik Renew, as he did have 15 points, but he had one more rebound than myself. Khalil Ware had himself a very good game in his debut at Indiana. 3 blocks, 13 points, 12 rebounds. He looked like the real deal, but depth looks like it might be coming into play a little bit with this Indiana team as well. Stony Brook, they were able to get into the back door against St. John's by kind of 90-74 after St. John's. They're up 23 points with about 3:25 remaining. I was one of those suckers that laid the points with St. John's, so misery has company there. Joel Soriano picking up right where he left off last season, 22 points, 11 rebounds, and Chris Ledlum, 14 rebounds as well for St. John's. They did go 11 of 22 from three-point range, and I do think that this is a slightly improved Stony Brook team from a season ago, though Aaron Clark didn't have a big performance, only 5 points. Him being back out there is big, but certainly a little bit of a rough one on that Tuesday. Lemoyne, their Division I debut did not go as planned. Keep in mind, Lemoyne, they played one game against a Division I team last year. That was against Buffalo. They lost by like 32 points. And then Georgetown, they just clobbered them 94-57. I was wondering why this game opened up with Georgetown laying less than 20. With Georgetown, you got production out of pretty much all of your starters. The only one that didn't score in double figures is the man that had 46 points in an exhibition matchup at Jaden Epps, but Epps instead gave out 11 assists. Does want to clean up the 5 turnovers, but all in all, a very good performance from Georgetown. They controlled the glass, winning that battle by a count of 52-29. Wayne Bristol Jr. had himself a double-figure amount of rebounds coming off the bench. Game number 1 for Ed Cooley, very, very good, and looks like our good friends in Lemoyne, they're going to have a rough time of it. You saw Mount St. Mary's be one of those few teams going up against a highly touted team to be able to cover a big number, 68-53 the final. The Mount, they were about a 20 to a 21 point underdog depending upon where you looked, and flat out for Maryland, they just had such a low possession game that made it tough to be able to cover this one. As for Maryland, they also did have 15 turnovers in this game. You did have Julian Reese put in their 18 points, and for Mount St. Mary's, they just made this game very, very ugly to say the least. Only went 2 of 12 from three-point range, so they were able to get in, and they were able to get a cover. My DK Network write-up pick, that hit by a country mile. We laid 19 with Iowa, and they win 110-68. This was an utter bludgeoning from the start, as Iowa now 17-4 against the spread since the start of the 2019-20 season when laying at least 18 points. North Dakota, 4 of 25 from three-point range. BJ Omot had 24 points, and it was not nearly enough as North Dakota lost the turnover battle by kind of 19-7. They lost the rebound battle 44-38, and for Iowa, they have scored at least 75 points in every single one of their home games since the beginning of the 2022-23 season. They went 12 of 24 from three-point range, so they just completely sizzled in that one. I am doing this as Presbyterian is putting the final touches on Vanderbilt. I am doing this live with Presbyterian up by 14 points with about 3 minutes remaining, and this is one of the issues that you're going to have with betting college basketball. Tyron Lawrence ruled out just before the game for Vanderbilt. There was a little bit of rumblings with injuries with him. It's not like it completely came out of left field, but it certainly was something where you expected him, maybe Van Allen Lubin, to be out there on the floor, and those guys were not, and that certainly did put Vanderbilt behind the 8 ball. And as I do this with about 3 minutes remaining, Vanderbilt 4 of 26 from three-point range. A Presbyterian who I still don't think they're going to be a good team in the Big South this season. They were able to take advantage with having 11 points off the bench from Crosby James. They went 4 of 12 from three-point range as I recorded this. And for Vanderbilt, even though they were doing a good job on the glass, losing that turnover battle by kind of 14-11, ultimately going to doom them down 61-50 with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. So that one looks like it's not going to be going their way. This one does not look like it's going to be going the way of UNC Asheville. As I record, Michigan in the early part of the second half up by kind of 64-40. As for UNC Asheville, Drew Pember is absolutely awesome, but he has been completely neutralized in this one. Picked up 4 fouls in the first 5 minutes of the second half, so that's less than terrific. And teach me how to Dougie McDaniel. How about his game? 19 points, 6 assists in the first 25 minutes of the game. And this is a Michigan team that is currently without Juwan Howard. They're currently under the tutelage of actually Phil Martelli. And Phil Martelli is a man that knows how to coach. So I'm certainly taking note there. And currently as I do this, Fort Wayne, good old IPFW, up on DePaul by kind of 37-26. DePaul dealing with a few injuries to the likes of Mac ATN and company, so something to watch for there. And anything that might be earth-shattering from the back half of Tuesday, I'll be cleaning that up on the podcast tomorrow. I don't think that this is. Creighton currently up 56-27 at the half against Florida A&M. Florida A&M, one of the worst teams in all of college basketball. We're just going to call it what it is, so nothing really shocking there. And with regards to what we've seen in the first day plus of the college basketball season, looking at betting trends, we certainly have been seeing the favorites being able to cover a whole lot. As I record this is with a few games pending for Tuesday. Favorites 69, 48, and 2 against the spread. That is a 59% hit rate. I do think that that's going to be leading to quite a bit more value on those underdogs moving forward, and we've been seeing a whole lot of overaction. Something that I'm going to be talking about in segment number 2 with our good friend Rob Donaldson is the fact that it feels like the refs have been very, very happy with the whistle to begin the season. 66 overs, 53 unders. We've had a few pushes along the way as well. I think that as I record this, we probably had like 2 pushes, but certainly it has been overwhelming to say the least. Once again, with a few games for Tuesday pending, but I will be keeping track of these trends all season long on this podcast, trying to find out, all right, where are we able to unearth some value? Where are we seeing some things shifting? Because I do think that that's important to do. And what else is very important? Getting great guests on this podcast. Rob Donaldson, he certainly fits the bill. He does great work with his show/podcast on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. It's Rob's Best Bets Show. And he joins me next to talk about the importance of free throw shooting when handicapping college basketball, what he's looking at early on in the season, and Wednesday's games here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Hoops and Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, Rob Donaldson. He does amazing work handicapping so many different things, from baseball to college football to college basketball. This man is a wizard on so many different fronts, does amazing work whenever he joins this show/podcast, breaking down the great game of college basketball. he, much like myself, follows us all 12 months out of the year, and you're able to follow him on his YouTube feed at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson for the Rob's Best Bets show, where he does amazing work, and he's on Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And, obviously baseball came to an end, and you and I love that sport, but college basketball is definitely my favorite sport to watch, at least as a bettor. It's up there for my favorite sport, just period, but definitely as a bettor when you have so many games on the line and, so many different teams that you can continue to watch and never get, full of it in terms of ingesting knowledge. It's just great.
It is absolutely incredible. And what did you make out of night number 1 in college basketball? Because we did see the big Michigan State upset, but really aside from that, we did notice that those dominant teams like UConn and Kansas were able to cover. And I think that we are having a nice line of demarcation between the haves and the have-nots, while those teams in the middle feel like they're going to be very pesky this year.
And what I really like about the first couple weeks, at least with college basketball, is just kind of being able to capitalize on overreactions. Because what's going to happen to a team like Michigan State is, I guarantee you, they have some big-time matchups coming up with top 10 teams. They are going to be an underdog in that one now, presumably after that loss to James Madison. Yet you and I know that Michigan State is a talented team who can hang with anyone in the country. I think this just kind of gives us a chance to, take some value away from that and get them at a discounted price. And that's how I kind of feel about a lot of these teams. And, even some of the teams who won but maybe didn't win convincingly, I feel the same way about.
Yep, I do agree with you there. And when it comes to a team like Michigan State, certainly they're a team that is going to get dogged quite a bit for that loss that they took early on. And how much do you want to be just taking a look at these early season results and trying to gauge, all right, should I be downgrading a team or should I be sticking with them? Because I do think that the context of a loss is so big as well, because we were referring to Michigan State, and I don't think that Michigan State is going to be shooting sub 1 for 20 from 3-point range anytime soon once again. So I'm a little bit less concerned about them rather than a team that might get upset as a 10-point favorite and they get pummeled on the glass, losing that rebound battle by 10. So I do think that the context of these losses is so important as well as to whether or not to downgrade a team or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Flow of a game can be so drastic, and the scoreboard cannot potentially reflect what actually happened in the ball game. I mean, you look at that Oregon-Georgia game, that was sort of the inaugural real kickoff of high major ball in college basketball this season. It was about almost nearly a 30-point game at one point for Oregon, and they had a strong lead. But Mike White and those Georgia Bulldogs came storming back and made it a ball game. And we got a lot of, hints at what both of those teams could potentially be. But when you look at the scoreboard and you see a double-digit winner, it's not indicative of what actually transpired there.
Yeah, but I think that is so interesting. As joined me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson. He does tremendous work with his show, the Rob's Best Bet show. And something that I noticed on opening night, it did feel like the referee's whistle was very much out and in full force. You mentioned that Oregon versus Georgia game. It felt like if you breathed the wrong way, that was going to be drawing a foul. How much did you take a look at that? Because I feel like I'm going to be shading up my totals just a little bit towards the beginning part of the season until the whistle dies down. And we have seen this from time to time in college basketball where they call more fouls than they will more towards conference play. But that was a little bit of a takeaway from me. It just felt like those fouls, they very much were adding up for these teams. And that allows some of these games that they might be trending a little bit more towards an under to go over.
I absolutely agree. And what's really interesting is especially about when we get these early season tournament action games, is we're going to see some action. And the referees, if they feel like they have to step in and generate it for the viewers, it's going to be there. This is holiday season. You got Thanksgiving, you're around people, you're betting a lot because now sports betting is becoming more legal in a lot of states. And they want to try to manufacture, I think, some good times or some good vibes between you and your friends or you and your family. That's typically going to involve, or theoretically, that's what they want to kind of generate, is offense or points and close matchups. So I definitely think early season overs are definitely a strong play there.
Yeah, but I've noticed that time and time again. It does feel like the overrate in college basketball. Sans last year where we had that ridiculous 3 or 4 week stretch of January where it felt like everything went over. It was unlike anything I've really ever seen. Sans that, we have been seeing in quite a few seasons. The overs, they're very prevalent early on during the season, and then things get dialed back just a little bit with the scoring. As Rob Donaldson, who does great work as a handicapper on the Rob's Best Bet show, is trying to be on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you were mentioning these non-conference tournaments, and we are going to be seeing a pair of neutral court games that are going to be going down on Wednesday. That would be the Florida Atlantic versus Loyola Chicago game, though. It's at Wintrust Arena. That is in Chicago. So a pseudo home game, I think is fair to say, for Loyola Chicago and Arizona State versus Mississippi State. How do you gauge neutral court games as opposed to home games? Because like I said, for Loyola Chicago, it is somewhat of a home game for them. But certainly for Mississippi State and Arizona State, that's a true neutral court game. And I do tend to shave my totals down just a little bit when it comes to these neutral court games, just due to the uncertainty of the environment, new surroundings, and things of that nature.
Yeah, especially in regards to that Arizona State, Mississippi State game. That's a game that I could see going 63-57. When you're talking about the other one with Florida Atlantic and Loyola Chicago, isn't that just such a bait line right out the gate on a short slate? I mean, the perception right now is kind of what you want to fade early on in the season if you see a line like that. For that reason, I'm going to have a little bit of a hand in on Loyola Chicago begrudgingly, because last year, man, that team looked absolutely dreadful, and Florida Atlantic looked the exact opposite of that in every single way. But when you're seeing a line of 5, and it is, like you said, like almost a pseudo home game for Loyola Chicago, you got to kind of measure where public perception is going to be. I mean, a lot of people just saw this Florida Atlantic team nearly make the championship game. Loyola Chicago has kind of fallen off the map in recent years. So it's just really indicative when you see these types of lines. And that's really early on kind of what I want to target.
And how do you view this Florida Atlantic team as a whole this season? Because they bring back darn near everyone from a season ago. You mentioned it. If it wasn't for the fact that Lamont Butler hits that shot for San Diego State, Florida Atlantic is playing UConn for a national title, and who knows what happens from there. But that said as well, with Florida Atlantic, they did not look good in their exhibition matchups, which I don't make too much out of those exhibition matchups personally. But that said, I think that it is very interesting to look at a team like Florida Atlantic because they bring back darn near everyone from last season, a team that made the Final Four. But we saw a similar team from an 8-9 matchup make the Final Four and a national title in North Carolina, bring back a lot of guys, and they completely flopped last year.
Yeah, you said it. And one of those things that kind of happens, especially when you have a team that like Florida Atlantic that really rose to prominence really fast because, prior to last season, yeah, they took the college basketball world by storm, especially if you're a sports bettor and you've been watching that team early on last season and you were, recognizing that they were covering spreads against teams that normally would run them out of the gym, especially when they were catching, plus 10 type lines early on. But sophomore slumps really are a thing, especially when teams are retaining a lot of the talent that they previously had. And now you're talking about a team that's going into a different conference, has playing with a lot of expectations, is essentially getting every single team's best shot every single night. When you're talking about a bunch of players who haven't really been in that type of situation or have had that target on their back, it plays different. And I think that's why you're seeing a line like this. And I'm not going to be shy from, targeting those types of teams, maybe not an outright money line against Florida Atlantic because I still think they're a good team. But I don't think they're going to be covering as many spreads as they were last year early on.
And Florida Atlantic was a money machine for you all season long last year as well. And typically from one year to the next, you do notice those teams that the previous year they covered a bunch of games. The next year, typically, we do see regression. As shown to me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does tremendous work over at his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with regards to the other game in Mississippi State versus Arizona State, right now finding Arizona State as between a 4.5 and a 5-point underdog. And I'm inclined to take a look at the points with Arizona State just because with Mississippi State, I think that Tolu Smith injury is a really big deal. The lone guy that averaged a double-figure amount of points was the team's top rebounder, was very integral to what they did on offense, very big part of what they did on defense. I'm not sure how you view this game because Arizona State does have a lot of moving parts, but in a defense-oriented game with a Mississippi State team that cannot bury free throws, I do think that taking the points here is the way to go.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a team that's always going to be high variance. It's going to be Arizona State. I mean, this team has guys who can run the floor in 2 seconds and throw down a dunk in your face or hit a step back three, and they can win by 30. They can also lose by 30. And it's just one of those teams that it's tough to back because they can be so frustrating or they can make you feel right from, the first 10 minutes on. I do feel inclined if I was going to take a side there to lean towards the points with Arizona State. I might be a little bit picky and target some of these more mid-major matchups, but I definitely kind of lean where you're leaning as well there.
Yeah, and with Mississippi State, just such a big part of it is a free throw shooting aspect. In road/neutral court environments last year, shot 62.9% from three. So even if they are up like 7-8 points with a minute remaining, there is no guarantee that they do indeed get that cover. And how much do you want to take a look at that early on during the season? Because we were talking about it a little bit before, the fact that it does feel like these refs are calling a few more fouls at this point of the year than they will be in conference play. And I do think that as a result, we do need to value free throw shooting even more now this time of year, which I always think that free throw shooting needs to be part of your handicap, but I think it needs to be a bigger part now this point of the year rather than in conference play, because I feel like we're going to see more free throw attempts in general.
Yeah, and the lines you want to kind of steer clear of, or at least be wary of when you're betting on teams that really do struggle to shoot free throws, are going to be that 5 to about 9 range, because, they might have a comfortable lead of 12 or 14 down the stretch, or maybe the entire game. But then once they get sent to the line, who are they going to have on the floor who's going to consistently make free throws? I mean, we've seen this several times with teams over the years where they are just abysmal, and a 14 or 12-point ball game turns into a backdoor cover of a final of a 6-point game where it never felt like that, but there it is. You definitely got to be a little bit wary with backing some of these teams that really struggle to shoot free throws. Really, the only time I want to be backing teams like that are when you're thinking that it's going to be just a total blowout with one of these minus 20 or minus 18.5 spreads. That's kind of where early on in the season, when we're trying to figure out how good these teams are from the stripe, those are the spreads that I would be targeting there.
And I think that that's such a good point that you bring up. I feel like free throw shooting is much bigger in a tight spread game. Like I was talking about Arizona State versus Mississippi State. I mean, a spread of like 4.5 to 5. Free throw shooting certainly comes into play there. If you've got like SMU versus Western Illinois, a spread of more like 16.5, I value free throw shooting much less, because even if you have a bad free throw shooting team, that's probably not going to decide the spread, because if the game is like a 15-point deficit with 30 seconds to go, you hope and pray that a team is not falling down 15 with 30 seconds remaining. Now, I still remember a few years ago, we had a few teams like Danny Manning, when he was coaching up Wake Forest, he would fell down like 37 points with 20 seconds remaining. That was absolutely ridiculous. Cost to be a few unders. I still remember that very, very well. But I do think that free throw shooting also takes a little bit more precedent in these tight spread games, rather than if you have a spread of like 20 or so, you don't have to put into account free throw shooting quite as much, because you're probably not going to be getting those last minute fouls. And if you do, it's not going to matter to the spread anyway.
Yeah, at that point, when you're kind of measuring, those potential backdoor covers, when you're of minus 15, minus 14, all the way up to minus 20 or beyond, you're looking at the other team that's sort of the underdog in that spot and saying, hey, is this a team that when they're kind of just getting these wide open looking jumpers, whether it's 3-point jumpers or attacking to the lane, do they have guys who can make those buckets? And, if they do drive to the lane, do we have guys who are going to be playing defense at that stage of the game who are going to be willing to step in front and maybe play some good defense? And that can come down to coaching style. That can come down to individual players on both sides of the ball. But yeah, it's definitely something you want to be monitoring. And it's definitely something that when you watch a lot of basketball, like you just mentioned with Danny Manning, you kind of pick up on these tendencies, and some of them will drive you crazy and maybe just kind of steer you off of a game. And others are like, hey, we're never really out of it. And I kind of like backing this team.
Yep, with Danny Manning, they used to call it Danny and the Miracles back in the day when he was at Kansas. It was a miracle when he didn't fall down 20 with 20 seconds remaining. It really brought new definition to that name, and it was just a pit of sadness, to say the least. But what is happiness is having college basketball back in our lives, Rob. And Rob, I know you were mentioning that you're going to be looking at more of these mid-major games for Wednesday. What are some of the games that you have your eye on? And maybe you already have placed a bet on this game, or maybe you will be overnight.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking a look at that Canisius and Syracuse matchup. I'm kind of bullish on this Canisius team this year as being one of maybe the surprises out of the MAAC. This is a team that went up to Canada during the summer and played some games and got some reps early on before a lot of these teams. And, Syracuse under Autry in year one, this wasn't a good Syracuse team the past 3-4 years, let alone, a team with a change in defense, a team with a lot of roster turnover. And now they're laying this tempting spread of minus 13 or minus 14, depending on the book you're wanting to use. And a lot of people are going to see Syracuse and a new upstart Syracuse team with a new look and wanting to lay that number. I am very bullish on potentially Canisius pulling off an outright upset here, let alone covering the spread. So that's definitely one that I already have a bet on. And I'm just waiting for the money line to post on some of my books here to get the full scope of that game as well.
Absolutely. And then I do want to get your thoughts on this game as well, because I know that a lot of people are queasy with laying big numbers, but as long as we can keep this number under 24, I am going to be looking at Texas Tech for Wednesday against Texas A&M Commerce. I do view these teams coming up from the non-D1 level as being ones that are a little bit more of a roll of the dice. We saw Texas A&M Commerce get lambasted against Texas A&M on Monday. Granted, a very good Texas A&M team, but I do take a look at this Texas Tech team. I think there's a lot of upside there, and with Commerce, I feel like they're just a disjointed offense. I'm not sure if you've got any sort of a thought here or if you just try to stay away from laying big numbers like Texas Tech is laying, but I, in the past, used to be one that used to be very queasy about laying these big numbers, but I do see a nice edge with Texas Tech for Wednesday.
I'm right there with you, and this will actually be a bet that I place tomorrow as well on Texas Tech. When you look at Commerce out of the Southland, this wasn't a team that was good in their own conference last season. In fact, they were getting bullied by teams that had length or athleticism at the wing spots. Texas Tech is a team that I really do think can match up well with them and really bring it to them and attack early. And right now, you're seeing a line of maybe 23.5 or 22.5 around there. I think this is a line that finishes closer to 27.5, kind of like how we saw Creighton open up at minus 30 and then skyrocket all the way up to minus 38 in some spots. And I really do think these big numbers early on with teams going up against really inferior mid-major talent or even low major talent, these are the spots that I really like to target. And kind of like you, I was at one point kind of queasy about laying these big numbers because of the amount of backdoor potential that lies with them. But I really do think Texas Tech could win this game by 50, and I'm willing to take that upside there.
Yep, I am right there with you. And with Texas A&M Commerce, they are not a team like Bellarmine that I felt like they were ready to go at the D1 level. Merrimack a few years ago. Texas A&M Commerce, not on that level, but a man that is on a completely different level to so many others because he does amazing work. That would be you, Rob. Rob, you do an incredible job handicapping college football, college basketball. You do amazing work whenever you join this podcast. You were great all season long in baseball and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Greg, and always love hopping on with you. Like I always say, you are the gold standard when it comes to this, and everybody else is just kind of chasing after you to kind of get where you've been. But if you want to kind of follow along with my bets, you can do so on X at RobDFB. And also on YouTube at Rob Donaldson, just my name. I have a channel that I try to post daily on there, at least 5 times a week. Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun college basketball season. And as we kind of wrap up NFL and college football, that should be fun pretty too.
Oh, it is going to be absolutely tremendous. This is going to be a great college basketball season. Rob is here for the long haul, all 5 months of the year. Every single time he joins this podcast, he lends tremendous insights, and it's always great to be able to get him aboard. Big thanks to Rob for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Heaps, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis for every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always tremendous to get Rob Donaldson aboard. Rob does amazing work with his show/podcast over on his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. The show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He does amazing work with that throughout the year. He's done an incredible job with regards to baseball, college football, you name it, he does it, and every single time he joins this podcast, he lends incredible insight. So, big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis for every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_D1. Also, a disclaimer that the non-D1 games are not going to be making the Las Vegas betting board, so if you are wondering why you are not seeing a game involving like some sort of a schlub non-D1 team, Shawnee State versus Moritz State game, the game between Morrisville versus Cornell, that's because Morrisville of New York is a non-D1 team. So that's why you're not seeing those games out there, but everything else, we've got your picks, analysis, breakdowns, and hopefully some winners. And let's get things started with 627, 628 on the betting board. It is Western Illinois on the road facing up against SMU. The Pony Express of SMU between 16.5 and 17-point favorites. Your total on this game is between 142.5 and 143.5. I said SMU is a 15.5 point favorite. Now that we're at 16 plus, going to be willing to take the points with Western Illinois. Was very impressed by James Dent in his season debut with Western Illinois. Came up from the non-D1 level. He was able to put in there 20 points. He's got a nice skill set in for Western Illinois. A little bit of a changing of the guard after Rob Buter left for the Southern Utah job, but they do bring back a few guys from last year like Quinlan Bennett. He last season was someone that was able to put in their 5.5 boards, 9.5 points per contest. Had a rough night, number one, but I think that he's going to be able to come along for the ride. Biggest question mark that you do have for Western Illinois is who's going to be bringing up the ball in their season opener. 9 assists to just 12 turnovers. Nobody really had more than 2 assists in their game, but you do have down low someone in Josiah West, who I think is going to be able to do a nice job with 9.5 points, 7.3 rebounds per game. They're going to need to do a solid job because Tariq Smith for SMU in the season debut of Southwest Asylum of God, I believe is who they played against. They played against a strange non-D1 team. He was able to give them 10 rebounds, and they do still have Samuel Williams, who has been in college basketball for forever and a half. He was able to average about 7.5 rebounds per game, but just like I'm talking about Western Illinois being a little bit rudderless in the backcourt, I feel that same way about SMU as well. They bring in Chuck Harris, who was a double-figure scorer over at Butler, but it's been inconsistent throughout his career. Has seen his scoring drop in each out of his 3 years in college basketball. You've got someone in Tariq Nutter who's able to put the ball in the basket, but I don't feel like you've necessarily got that true facilitator. You've got a bunch of strange bigs like Mo Njai, Xavier Foster, guys like this, and they've got a lot of athleticism, but they don't necessarily pop threes, and I just view this SMU team as one that's not going to be able to pull away. In their game against that non-D1 team in Southwest, I think it's like a Salem of God or something like that. They were only up 4 points at the half. They needed a big run at the end to pull away because they were having a tough time with the non-D1 school. I actually liked what I saw out of Western Illinois in their overtime loss against UT San Antonio, so I feel like this number's a little bit out of whack. Won't take 16 or more with Western Illinois. I did set my total at 145.5. Western Illinois, I think they're going to play a little bit more up-tempo than they did against UTSA for SMU. Defense very, very suspect with them, and I do think that both of these teams going to be able to get down low for some buckets. So looking at the over on 142.5/143.5, and looking at it Western Illinois with 16 plus. 629, 630 on the betting board. Ohio plays host to Troy. The men of Troy are between 9.5 and 10.5 point underdogs. Totals between 146.5 and 147.5. I did set my total at 143. I'm diving under. Ohio was uncharacteristically bad on defense. Outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. Jeff Bowles is an incredible coach, and I do think that he's going to be able to get these guys to play a little bit more crisp on the defensive side of things. And for Ohio, I do like the pieces that they have coming back, as they had to go through a little bit of transition with losing all the guys that they did from a few seasons ago. Mark Sears was no doubt about it a big-time guy for the team. Jason Preston, we all remember what he was able to do a few seasons ago, but now I think that they've really been able to find their footing in terms of this backcourt as they bring in their Ike Cornish, a 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy from Maryland. Didn't necessarily score a lot while he was there, but he's going to be able to be a very nice complement to the Browns, as you've got A.J. Brown along with Miles Brown. Miles Brown last year was really your main three-point shooter. 10 points per contest, shot about 45% from three-point range. A.J. Brown, 10.5 points. He was able to deliver a steal per contest. He shot about 37.5% from three. Has a little bit more size than Miles. These guys make a nice 1-2 punch. And then Sharif Mitchell coming over from Creighton. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. When he was over at Creighton, he just fell out of favor a little bit in general last season. It felt like he was really gaining some footing during that 2020-2021 season where he was averaging an assist and a half, shooting 36% from three-point range. I think that he really elevates his offense. Meanwhile, for Troy, they lose so much of that scoring that they had from a season ago, and it's going to be really hard for them to be able to find a way to be able to manage in the backcourt. You bring back Christian Eugene, and he was solid last year with about 2.5 assists per contest. He was able to register 12 points per game, but he's legitimately really the only person from the backcourt from a season ago that was able to give this team a double-figure amount of points. Sans also Amir Mohammed. Amir Mohammed, he last season had a little bit over 10 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, but you don't have a lot of other guys that are able to have the ball in their hands. They only had one guy last year that was really able to give them north of 5.5 rebounds per game, and say Williams. he has now moved on as well. So I do think that Troy going to be a little bit up against it down low. It's not like Ohio has necessarily supreme size down low, but I think that Gabe Woods-Nitzer, who began his career at Louisville, is going to be able to take hold with Jalen Hunter and the way that he's able to give 3+ assists per contest for Ohio. I think that they're better in the backcourt with all the losses that Troy took in the offseason. I think that's going to be a little bit tough for them. And Troy, they were not even great on offense last season. They were much better on the defensive side of things. And I do think that Ohio is an improved defensive team as well. So did set Ohio as an 11-point favorite, willing to lay up to 10.5 and not half a point more with Ohio, and going to be taking a look at this total north of 146, under 631, 632 on the betting board. It is Syracuse, they play host Canisius. Canisius is a underdog between 12.5 and 13 points. Your total, it is between 148 and 149. I did set Syracuse as a 14.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay it with Canisius. I just question the overall talent of this roster. They've been really having a rough time out in the Metro Atlantic for the last few years. I did like the fact that they brought in Joan Jones III, and if he could just stay healthy, because he has dealt with being in and out of the fold at Georgia State for many, many years, that'd be big. He missed pretty much 2 full seasons. So if he's able to blossom, that's going to be a nice find for the team. And then you've got Taj Stavosky, who last season he was able to log about 12.5 points per contest, but not necessarily a guy that's able to elevate from 3-point range. And that is a big issue that you've got with this team. You got guys like Bryce Okpo, Xavier Long that are able to combine for, between the two of them, about 12 rebounds per game. But Syracuse, they just have better athletes down low in general. And with Syracuse, I do like the way that this backcourt looks. You bring in Judah Mintz into the season debut. He was able to have 20 points against New Hampshire. I know that he was dealing with some ailments in the offseason. He looked just fine in that game. Couple that with J.J. Starlin, a former top 50 recruit, who I think that he's going to do a nice job being able to dole out the ball, being able to pop a few threes. And this is a Syracuse team that in general, they're going to have more depth this year than they did under Jim Boeheim. Jim Boeheim always played a very, very small rotation. And it's not like this is going to be like a 10-deep team or anything like that, but you can expect to see like 15-plus minutes out of someone like a Chris Bell, who's 6'7", going to be able to give you a few rebounds. I do think that they're going to be able to get some good production out of Malik Brown down low as well, a guy that was used in some spots last year with about 5.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. With Jesse Edwards gone, he really needs to step up along with Naheem McLeod, who's 7'4" because of his size. That does limit the amount of minutes that he's going to be able to play, and I do think that Syracuse going to be able to give a few different looks. It's a Canisius team that just throughout the years in general has been pretty rough on defense. They were actually not too bad towards the back half of Metro Atlantic play last year. I feel like that was a little bit more of a circumstance of the competition that they were playing against. In Syracuse, they did prove to be a little bit more of an up-tempo team in their season debut, but I do think that Canisius going to have to launch from 3 quite a bit, and I think that they're going to be a little bit off point. I set my total at 148.5, so now that we're approaching 149, I'm going to be willing to take a 149 or higher under, as this is a total that opened up at 147.5 and seems to be climbing right now. So at a 149 or higher, looking under, and with Syracuse willing to lay up to 14 points with them. 633, 634 on the betting board. We head to Wintrust Arena in Chicago, Illinois, as the Loyola of Chicago plays host to Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic between a 4 and 5 point favorite. Total on this game is 143. This is essentially a pseudo home game for Loyola Chicago. Not a true home game, but I mean, it's being played in the city of Chicago. They are Loyola Chicago, so you can tie that in there. And despite that, I did set Florida Atlantic as an 11-point favorite. I recognize that a lot of people are a little bit off put by the fact that Florida Atlantic did not look good in their exhibition games, and I don't think that they're worthy of being the number 10 team in the country right now, but there's a lot of people in on Loyola Chicago, a team that covered fewer than 33% of their games last year, and I just generally don't see it. Philip Alston is someone that was very solid last year, shot 40% for 3, 14.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I like what he's going to be able to bring to the table, but Loyola Chicago was very sloppy with the ball. Now they're going to be looking to Ivy League transfers for the second straight year to be able to elevate this team. They bring in Greg Dillon, who he was zoning it out over at Cornell with about 13.5 points, 3.5 assists. Did shoot at about 42.5% from 3-point range. Dame Edelkuhn, he's another Ivy League transfer, about 7 boards, 14 points per contest at Dartmouth at 6'8". He's able to pop some threes, didn't necessarily take a whole ton of them, but Braden Norris, you saw him sometimes get a little bit out of control with the ball. Had 4 assists per contest, but nearly 2.5 turnovers per game. felt like he was very inconsistent in general. Desmond Watson, I just don't know how he's going to be able to fit with this program as well. And Loyola Chicago, they need to pride themselves on being able to develop these guys, staying within the system, having camaraderie, and they've now brought in a lot of transfers, and I don't know if it's for the better. Meanwhile, Florida Atlantic, really other than Michael Forrest, this is the same stinking team that last year was in the top 25 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. What I love about Florida Atlantic is that they will just beat you at your game. If you play up-tempo, they'll beat you with your up-tempo style. If you want to play slow, they will slow it down. They'll beat you there as well. And they're just such a well-rounded team. You only had one player average more than 5.5 rebounds per game in Vladislav Golden, but each other top 4 scorers. They all gave you at least 4.3 rebounds per game. They rebound by committee. They do a nice job of not turning the ball over. They get some turnovers, but at the same time, they just do a good job of staying on their man. They bring back Elijah Martin along John L. Davis. I recognize that Martin has been dealing with a few ailments, but he should be good to go in this one. This was a team that as a whole also shot 37.5% from 3, other than their true big men and like Vladislav Golden and John Carlos Rosado. Everyone on the floor is able to shoot threes. I do think that Florida Atlantic, bringing back all those guys from the Final Four, are they as good as a Final Four team? I tend to think not, but at the same time, I still think that they're ahead of a Loyola Chicago team that brought in a surprising amount of transfers this year, and even though this is being played in the city of Chicago, I think that Florida Atlantic, a very good road team a season ago, they get the job done. I set Florida Atlantic as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Did set my total at a 135. I think that with Loyola Chicago, they're going to be getting back to their roots, back when Porter Mosier was there, and play a little bit more slowly, because we've seen as Loyola Chicago has cranked up the tempo, and it's gotten worse and worse for them. So, going to be diving in on the under, and with it being a neutral court game, that also helps out with the under, and I am going to be willing to lay the number with Florida Atlantic. This is going to be the DK Network write-up pick, 635, 636 on the betting board. Mississippi State and Arizona State to battle from Wintrust Arena in Chicago. Mississippi State, a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite. Your total, it is between 134.5 and 136. I think the wrong team is favored. I am going to be taking Arizona State with my DK Network write-up pick. Now, in the DK Network article, it's going to be listing the spread just because typically overnight money lines are not available. That's a big reason why I typically do stick with the spread, even though I personally will be going with the money line of Arizona State. My personal bet will be on the money line. Write-up is going to be on the spread. Either way, I like Arizona State in this spot, and with this Arizona State team, I mean, while they're not quite the same animal on defense as Mississippi State, what they do a nice job of is they take away the shots beneath the rim. And by that, I mean Arizona State. They were number 2 in the country in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage last year. That's a big issue for a Mississippi State team that was dead last in the country in 3-point shooting percentage. They can't do any worse than last year, because last year there were 363 D1 teams. They were 363rd in 3-point shooting percentage. There's only 362 this year, so already they are doing better than they did a season ago. But for Mississippi State, they do bring in Andrew Taylor to be able to help out things with regards to the outside shot. He was able to log, while at Marshall, Andrew Taylor, 20 points, 4.7 rebounds, 4.7 assists, shot 36.5% from 3-point range. That's going to be able to help, but what hurts this team, their lone guy that averaged a double-figure amount of points per game last year, Tolu Smith, he is out. He is probably going to be out until conference play. He logged about 15 to 16 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. That's a big loss. They do bring in Jimmy Bell Jr. from West Virginia. That helps soften the blow a little bit. He was able to log about 5 rebounds per game. I can't say I was overly impressed by him. Now, they still have likes of DJ Jeffries down low. Keyshawn Murphy has 6'10" size, so these guys still should be relatively solid. And Trey Ford was one of the best junior college players in all of college basketball last year, but for Arizona State, I do think that defense is still going to be tenacious. They bring back their leader in assists in Frankie Collins, and though he's got a few moving parts in the backcourt, the Gamebridge brothers are on the fold. I do think that he is going to be able to rely upon Bryson Long, who he comes in from a little bit of a lower level of competition over at Houston Christian, but was just a pure scorer. 15 points per contest, shot about 41.5% from 3-point range. I think that 3-point shooting is going to translate. We don't know how much we're going to see out of Jose Perez. Apparently should be good to go in this game. I have my question marks. He has not seen the floor since being at Manhattan during the 2021-22 season. I knew he was at West Virginia up until a few weeks ago, so if he does give you anything, it's going to be very limited. This team also brings in Brian Salabongu along Zane Meeks to be able to elevate things down low. Meeks is a nice 3-point shooter, and in a tight game, this Mississippi State team last year shot 62.9% at the free throw line, went away from home 350th in the country. Arizona State is a better offensive team. Mississippi State losing their main guy on both defense and offense from a season ago. I think that affects them. My DK Network write-up pick is going to be on Arizona State on the spread. Firstly, whether you want to go spread or money line, I like Arizona State. I personally am going to take a stab at some plus money on the money line of Arizona State. And did something I told 131.5. Both of these teams were solid on defense. Arizona State top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year. Mississippi State top 10. I think you're going to see a relatively grody game on a neutral court. So looking under and my write-up pick, Arizona State catching the points, and I personally like the money line as well. 637, 638 is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we eat the extra games. Utah Tech is on the road facing off against Santa Clara. Santa Clara is a 9 to a 9.5 point favorite, and your total is between a 150.5 and 151.5. With Santa Clara, set them as 13.5 point favorites, so I'm going to be willing to lay it. I don't make too much out of these exhibition contest results or anything like that, but Santa Clara was able to knock off a Pac-12 school in UCLA a few weeks ago, and this Utah Tech team just loses so much from a season ago. You really had good production out of someone like Cameron Gooden, who was able to give you 17 points per contest. You were able to get some good production out of Jacob Nichols from three-point range. He shot 50% from three. He is gone. For Utah Tech, they pretty much lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from last season. Noe Gonsalves, along with Tanner Christensen, are going to need to hold it down. And Christensen at 6'10", nice skill set, 9.5 points, 7 boards, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, worked on his range a little bit, but I don't know who's going to be bringing up the ball for this team. Could it be a little bit of Caden Madsen, who really is a true freshman that is trying to come in and is trying to be able to give this team a little bit of something. They bring in a few guys from the non-Division I level. Tennessee Rainwater is one of the most interesting names in all of college basketball. I've heard some good things out of him, but that said, lots of question marks in terms of who's going to be able to really run the offense. And for Santa Clara, Braden Podziemski being out full, that does hurt this team, but you still have quite a few guys in the backcourt that I like, and they brought in Jalen Benjamin, a double-figure scorer over at Mount St. Mary's. He has been around the block, gave out 4 assists, shot 37% from 3, out on the East Coast last year. Adama Ball, he was one of the better international recruits a few seasons ago, and we saw some moments of brightness from him over at Arizona a few seasons ago, and now you finally get a healthy Carlos Marshall. He had his season cut short to 3 games last season. 2 years ago at Tennessee State, 13 points per contest, shot over 40% from 3 as a 6'6", nice do-it-all player. Johnny O'Neal at 6'10" is able to pop threes. Christopher Tilley, Bakai Oboye, these are 2 guys that are north of 7 feet tall. And then you've got Francisco Cafaro, 7'1" gentleman that comes in from Virginia. This is way too much size for Utah Tech. Utah Tech really held their hat on three-point shooting last year. They lose all those good three-point shooters from a season ago. And I do think they're on Brenton Napper, who was a little bit of a limited guy last season for Santa Clara. He's going to be able to take some strides forward, have the ball in his hands a little bit more. I think that this is a surprisingly deep Santa Clara team that had some sneaky good pickups in the transfer portal. I think that Utah Tech just up against it. Semi-total 145.5. Santa Clara last year played very much up-tempo with their added size. I do think that they're going to be slowing things down, and with Utah Tech, I think their three-point shooting is just far worse than it was a season ago. So diving under and want to lay the points with Santa Clara. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-531, 306-532. The Quakers of Penn play host of Bucknell. Bucknell is an underdog of between 13.5 and 14 points. Total is between 141.5 and 142. 13.5 is the absolute max I'm willing to lay at Penn. With the current numbers, that is what I'd be willing to do, like 13.5. This is a little bit of a wait-and-see mode since I did set Penn as 14-point favorites. With Bucknell, a little bit of a regime change. John Griffin, who was a legend at Bucknell, part of that 14-3 seed upset when they knocked off Kansas many years ago. He's now at the helm, and he's really going to be relying upon the St. Joe's transfer and Jack Forrest, who did have 18 points in the team season opener last year. Shot about 39% from 3 at 6'5". He's got good versatility. I do fear that this team is going to be getting decimated on glass. You did see 8 rebounds in the season debut for Noah Williamson, a 7-footer that comes over from Latvia, but a little bit of a raw player. Meanwhile, for Penn, even though they do lose Jordan Dingle, even though they do lose quite a few of their guys from down low as well, that is going to be hurting them a little bit. They do bring back someone that I really do like in Nick Spinoso. He's got a nice, just well-rounded game in general. Last season, gave the team 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. Not a guy that's necessarily going to do one thing great, but just does a lot of things very solid in general. Eddie Holland III, I'm relying upon to have a nice leap forward. Last year shot 45.5% from three, but very limited amount of production. Was against a non-D1 school, but against John Jay, no, not the former St. Louis Cardinals great. He did have 16 points in that game as well. I do think that there's a lot of upside guys when it comes to this Penn team. They've been able to attract some very gifted players, including Clark Slazert. He last season was a double-figure scorer. I think that he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit with Penn. With Bucknell, I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, and you can tell that Bucknell just lacking on defense in general, gave up 78 points in their season debut against Delaware. I do think that's going to take a little bit of time for John Griffin to get his system all together with Bucknell, so I did set my total at 144. I do think that Penn is going to be able to gash Bucknell, and I do think that Bucknell is going to be one of the lesser defensive teams in college basketball this year, so looking at this 141.5 to 142 overhand at 13.5 and not a half a point more. Willing to lay it with the Quakers of Penn. 306-533, 306-534. Drake is going to be playing us at Lipscomb. Lipscomb is an underdog of between 13.5 and 15 points. And your total on this game, it is between 143.5 and 144.5. I set Drake as a 10.5 point favorite. I do think that Drake is going to be one of the best mid-major teams in all of college basketball. This does feel a little bit lofty, though, as you've got the DeVries duo, as you've got Tucker DeVries out there on the floor being coached up by his father. And Tucker last year, 18.5 points, 5.5 boards, played just so well off the ball, and that was the key because as a freshman, I felt like they had the ball in his hands a little bit too much, but they might need to put it in there a little bit more this year because they do lose Roman Penn in the backcourt. Now, someone I do like in Aiton Wright, he does come over from the Big West. He's not too much of a ball handler, but should be able to take the load off in the backcourt, 16.5 points per game while he was over at CSUN. You also have Darnell Brody down low, who he had 6'10". I expect him to have 8+ rebounds per game. I think that he is going to be able to dominate down low. And then when it comes to Kyron Gibson coming over from UT Arlington, I do think that he's going to be a little bit of an elevator as well. And you look to him being able to dole out some offense as well. A little bit under 4 assists, 11 points per contest, solid 3-point shooter. But with Lipscomb, even though they lost to Wichita State by double figures night number 1, were unable to cover, I do like what I see out of this team. You've got AJ McGinnis, who's able to give you a double-figure amount of points per game. He had 17 points in that season opener. Darren Boyd last year shot just below 40% from three-point range. A little bit more of an off-the-ball guard that I think is a really nice helper when it comes to this Lipscomb team that has been dealing with some injuries. You notice that in the season opener, Jacob Onyesovic, he just was unable to get out there on the floor. And I do think that with Jacob Onyesovic being out, it does downgrade the team a little bit, but they bring in Owen McCormick, who was able to log about 4 to 5 rebounds per game at Presbyterian. He should be able to do a solid job down low going up against Darnell Brody, and I do expect a little bit of better production than we saw night number 1 out of Will Pruitt. Pruitt last year just did it all with about 10 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, steal per contest while shooting 41% from 3, 6'3", not afraid to get his nose dirty, sort of do-it-all player. Reminds me a little bit of Grant Sturtz when he was over at Drake. So with Lipscomb, even though you are dealing with that injury to Onyesovic, who I think he is going to be out of the fold for quite a while for this Lipscomb team, I do think that they are going to be able to get the job done, and they are going to be able to hang within about 10 or so points. I set this line at 10.5, so getting 13 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Lipscomb. Did set my total at a 142.5. Drake has really been a good defensive team, a team that was in the top 40 last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Lipscomb, not necessarily a super up-tempo team, so look at under and looking to take the points with Lipscomb. 306-535, 306-536. Texas Tech playing us at Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce is between a 22.5 and to a 24-point underdog. 131.5 to 132.5 is your total. With Texas Tech, I did set them as 24-point favorites, seeing between 22.5 and 23 in a lot of spots. I am going to be willing to lay it. I am a big believer in Grant McCasland and his style. With Grant McCasland, he was at North Texas last year. His team was dead last in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and he did a nice job of being able to balance transfers, but at the same time, being able to keep some of the guys from last year in the fold. Someone like a Pop Isaacs is back from a season ago, and I think that that is so crucial because he did a nice job of being able to mix and match in the transfer portal, bringing in someone like a Joe Toussaint, who last year at West Virginia was averaging darn near 10 points per contest, is able to give you a few assists. That's big. If Kerwin Welton can get back to shooting 40+% from 3 like he did a few seasons ago at UNC, that's going to be big for this team. Warren Washington is a 7-footer that's able to do a nice job down low like he had with Abdu Usman at North Texas last season. And for Texas A&M Commerce, this team just simply does not have any size whatsoever. They are most likely going to be looking at the Brewer and Jerome Brewer Jr. to do a little bit of everything. 6'9" gentleman that last year for the team had about 8 points, 3.5 boards, was shot in the low 30s from three-point range. He was really the only guy that could do anything in their season opener against the Aggies of Texas A&M. Now with Commerce, this team should be able to generate a few turnovers. They've got a little bit of a funky zone defense that they like to play, but there's just not a lot of shooting in general when it comes to this team. They are really going to need to have Kalen Williams be able to elevate. Last season, he was a starter for the team that logged about 9 points, 2.5 assists per contest, and he figures to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, but you really don't have a lot of rhyme or reason right now with a team that just 2 seasons ago was at the Division II level. They need VJ Reeves Jr., who began his career at Central Arkansas, to elevate the team. I just don't see it with them, and even though Texas Tech has a lot of moving parts, I think they should be able to take it to a Commerce team that they just struggled to put the ball in the basket, and I think that Texas Tech is going to be playing at a slow, methodical style, much like McCaslin did at North Texas. I did set my total as a result at a 130, diving under it with Texas Tech, one to lay up to 23.5 with them. 306-537, 306-538. Seattle U is playing us to Prairie View. Prairie View is a 15.5 to a 17-point underdog. Total on this game is anywhere between 138.5 and 139. I did set Seattle as an 18-point favorite. I do think that Cam Tyson is going to be cooking up this Prairie View defense. Last season for Cam Tyson averaged just below 20 points per contest. We have seen him just be able to take over games. Last season, there were a lot of circumstances where a bad shot for him was better than a good shot for other guys, and yet he was still able to be relatively efficient. And the Seattle team in general just has a lot of guys that are good role players in being able to elevate what he's able to do. Some like Paris Dawson, who he began his career over at Portland State last year. He had about 6.5 points per contest. Career about 33% three-point shooter. I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job playing off the ball. Brandon Chatfield, he had 6'10". I think he's going to be able to do a nice job down low. Last year at 5 rebounds per contest, while being actually about a 39% three-point shooter. We've got a lot of guys that are right around 6'6", like Victor Rakovic, along with Vlajov Penza. Hopefully I said those names correctly. They're able to pop threes, they're able to give you some rebounds, they're able to stuff the stat sheet along with Kobe Williamson as well. So Seattle does a nice job of playing positionless basketball. Meanwhile, with Prairie View, you just don't necessarily have a lot of size with this team. They do have a style in which they're able to generate a lot of turnovers. This team in 6 out of the last 7 years has been a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to be getting back to that, but year in and year out, this team has just never really been able to put the ball in the basket. I fully expect that to be the case once again this year. Now, they do bring in someone I do like in Javante Hopkins in their game to lead off the season against, I believe it was like Kansas City Christian. It was a non-D1 school. He was able to put in there 18 points, and last year shot 45.5% from three-point range at Tarleton State. Problem was at Tarleton State, he only took, I believe it was 11 threes, so not like it was a very high usage guy. Now, he does fit into the system very well, and the guy that I do look to is Nick Gonzalez. He comes in from Montana State a few seasons ago at Montana State. He was able to shoot about 36.5% from three at about 5.5 points per contest. I do think that he's going to be able to elevate this team, but with Prairie View, have to be wondering where you're going to be able to get that rebounding from. Ryan Miles had a double-double in the team season opener, but last year only had right in the neighborhood about 3 rebounds per contest. I think that with Seattle and all of their versatility in Prairie View having to go from the central time zone out west, that is going to be affecting them quite a bit, which is why I did set Seattle as an 18-point favorite. Prairie View, I do think that they're going to be playing a relatively sharp defense, and Seattle, they themselves have been a top 75 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis the last 2 seasons, but Prairie View is a little bit more of an up-tempo team, and Seattle plays at a quite brisk pace as well. I think that just sheer possessions gets you over. So I tell at 140 and one to lay up to 18 with Seattle. 306-539, 306-540. You've got UNLV playing OSA Southern. Southern finds themselves as underdogs of 18 to 19.5 points. Your total is anywhere between 144 and 145.5. I set UNLV as 18.5 point favorites. We are between 18 and 19.5. If I personally had to pick between these numbers, I would rather lay the 18 rather than take the 19.5 because Southern is just a completely new look team from a season ago. They lose 5 out of their top 6 scorers from a year ago. Southern was actually very good on defense. They were able to generate some turnovers. They were very much based around their backcourt, and with that backcourt completely gone, it does really cause some question marks as to what you're going to be able to get out of this team. And now in the fold, you've got Kevin Johnson as well, so it's a little bit of a transition there. They do bring in Brandon Davis. Brandon Davis, I think, is going to be a primary scorer for this team, who last season he was over at Texas State, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, so he's going to be a little bit of an elevator for the team. But Festus and Dumania, he's going to need to really step up down low. You really didn't have anyone that gave you north of 5 rebounds per game a season ago for the Southern team as well, and now they have to go up against with a completely new look backcourt, a UNLV team that was one of the best in all of college basketball, being able to generate turnovers a season ago. Now with UNLV, they do lose someone like a Keshawn Gilbert, who I liked what he was able to bring to the table to this backcourt a season ago. EJ Harkless last year, he was supplying about 19 points per contest, but I think that they're going to be very, very prolific with the Boone brothers down low, along with Isaiah Cottrell. Cottrell is a former top 200 recruit of West Virginia. He's been injured the last few years. Now he has a bill of health. You've got Caleb and Keelan Boone, who are both able to give you some blocks. They have a little bit of versatility. And then Jalen Hill, who was averaging darn near 10 points per contest as a starter for Oklahoma last year, about 6 boards. He pops threes, doesn't necessarily pop them well, but is able to lend a little bit of versatility with these guys all teaming up with 6'6" Luis Rodriguez, who's one of the better glue guys in all of college basketball. Like what he's able to bring to the table. Now they are going to need to get a little bit more out of this backcourt that is going to be in a little bit of flux. You've got to be wondering where UNLV is going to be going in terms of their overall ball handling, but they do have a lot of guys that are going to be able to rip it away. Southern is going through the same sort of thing as I just don't know if there's a single guy on Southern that is going to be a primary ball handler for this team. Meanwhile, I still do feel like Justin Webster is someone that you're able to rely upon for scoring in the backcourt. I do think that Jackie Johnson III, someone who saw about, I would say, 13 and a half minutes per contest last year for UNLV. He should be able to step up, help out this backcourt, and give UNLV what they need to be able to cover a number of 18 or less. Like I said, between 18 to 19, I would rather lay 18 with UNLV rather than take 19. So that's where I'm looking on this one. And with regards to the total, I do think that UNLV is going to be playing quite a bit more up-tempo. Their defense is solid, but you did see them want to play quite a bit faster under Mr. Kruger last year. I did set my total 144.5 at 145.5. I do think we've went a little bit too far just because I don't know who that primary score is going to be for Southern. So at a 145.5, diving under, I'm willing to lay up to 18 with UNLV. And we wrap things up with 306.541, 306.542. San Diego, the Toreros play host to Jackson State. Jackson State, a 1.5 to a 2.5 point underdog, and your total between 148 and 149.5. San Diego very nearly lost to a non-D1 opponent in their season opener. A little bit concerning, but for Jackson State, I did have to set them as a 4.5 point underdog just because they have a few losses that they're going through as well. They were really banking on Deshaun Ruffin being able to elevate that backcourt. He gets injured before the season even starts, and his season is done. Now, they do have a pair of guys in the backcourt, and Ket Evans along with Chase Adams that last year combined for in that neighborhood of about 20, 21 points per contest. Adams, more of your facilitator with 3.5 assists per contest, but Jackson State, lots of suspect three-point shooting. You have to wonder what you're going to be able to get down low as well. They do bring in someone from within the conference, and Jordan O'Neal actually was playing under Mo Williams, who's now the head coach over at Jackson State. A few years ago, he was the coach at Alabama State. He was coaching up Mr. O'Neal when he was at Alabama State last year, 8.7 boards per contest. He should be able to help out this team a little bit, but I do think that San Diego just flat out has the better athletes in general. I do think that Wayne McKinney III is going to be in for a big season. Someone that last year had 7.5 points per contest, but 2 seasons ago shot 35% from 3. Last year shot 21% from 3. I think that he's going to be somewhere in the middle, probably going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. And for San Diego, they do have a little bit of question mark with regards to size down low, but PJ Haynes, who comes in from the non-D1 level, I think that he's a little bit of an under-the-radar transfer that should be able to elevate this team. I also like what I saw from Deuce Turner in the season debut as well. It was against a non-D1 team, but he was able to put in there 13 points last season for San Diego, shot about 36.5% from 3. It is a little bit of a changing of the guard for San Diego last year, as they had some nice take the top off of a defense scorer like Jace Townsend, Eric Williams Jr., Marcellus Earlington, but for San Diego, they were also one of the worst teams in terms of defense a season ago. I actually do think that losing some of those big-time scores is going to allow them to be a little bit better on defense, and with Jackson State, this is one of the most suspect three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and having to be out there on the West Coast, I do think that that is going to be taking it out of this Jackson State team just a touch, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. I think that's high possession, low scoring, so I did set my total at a 146.5 here at about a 148. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with San Diego, willing to lay up to 4 with them at home, and that will wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Rob Donaldson, tremendous handicapper of the Rob's Best Bet Show, for joining me in the live segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNR41. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, that is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to find out whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season on this podcast. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.